Hello, and welcome to Takes One to Write One. I'm Katherine Arcady, and I'm a writer. However, my characters are everything but. While research gives me information about their jobs and lifestyles, it doesn't give me the first-hand experience needed to write a well-rounded character. So I created this podcast where I invite people on to talk about their jobs, their hobbies, or their beliefs, because it takes one to write one. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with Marco and Nate, both regional pilots in the United States, with a combined experience of 17 years. I look forward to learning more, and I hope you do too. Let's hang. Well, Marco, Nate, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me.
Of course.
I think I'll start off this first question by asking more of a character profile than anything, and that is, what is in your fridge?
Veggie, fish, rice,
Okay.
for the most part, as much as I can possibly stand it until, I run into the pulled pork sandwich with coleslaw and mustard-based barbecue sauce. That's, yeah. I'm in trouble.
Well, I imagine it's hard to eat healthy on the road, grabbing whatever you can. Or,
It's
airlines
expensive
have
too.
It's
It's really expensive too. And when I say it's expensive, like there are places in every single airport where you can pull aside and buy green beans, asparagus, chicken breast, chicken thigh. There's places, but you're talking like for 3 chicken thighs, what would be $8 at the market? Less than that? That's $20.
Dang.
Yeah. Now what are you gonna get on the side of that? Garlic mashed potatoes soaked in butter.
Yum.
Yeah, exactly,
Sure.
right. But that calorie intake that you're
Chick-fil-A,
taking.
chicken nuggets though.
Oh yeah, no. Plus you get that 10% discount. Oh, it's real nice.
Oh?
You do get a 10% discount with wherever you go in the airport, and I will say,
You know what though?
over right by our gates, we got
What?
Potbelly. So whenever I
Well,
treat myself,
B-
I always
B
get
terminal?
a large Potbelly Italian on wheat.
Ooh.
Get that big old Sammy with those pickles.
Big old Sammy.
Nate, do you eat just about the same level?
Yeah, so I'm kind of like a walking garbage disposal, and
You're not.
I have a lot of trouble with those urges. But my solution was to always have like good snacks in my flight bag.
Okay.
So I ended up just like putting like Quest bars and beef jerky and stuff like that on like subscribe and save orders from Amazon. So it was I always had it somewhere convenient, and it would keep me from buying the big stuff, because there's this place out. Go ahead.
It will happen.
Mm.
I have prepped for 4 days of food,
Yeah.
and I've forgotten it in the fridge.
Oh yeah.
Oh, no.
I've gone on those 4-day trips, and I open up my lunchbox, and I'm like, oh,
Or
no.
you-
Oh, you bring the lunchbox?
What am I gonna do? Well, my flight bag
Or
has a
you'll-
lunchbox incorporated into it, right? So it's kind of like
It's neat.
yeah. So when you get there on day one, it's like, what do I do? And that's when you start, kind of strategizing.
Or you'll blow through 3 days of snacks in a single night.
Well, the other part too is, you don't know this.
Uh-oh.
Ooh.
We now have crew meals.
You do or don't?
We do.
You do have crew meals.
Yeah, they supply 3 meals a day.
Holy
Yeah, it's
wow.
quite nice. And we get paid per diem.
Dang.
Yeah. So
nifty.
it's roast beef, tuna salad, chicken salad. Had a Southwest Cobb salad. It's
I got 35 bucks a day and a smack on the back of the head.
yeah. Well, you don't get that. And it's the new crew meals are incredible.
That's neat. You mentioned flight bags. What is in your flight bags?
All sorts of goodies.
Pen.
Pilot G2 pens.
Pen,
The superior pen.
Pilot G2 pen has to be a Pilot G2 pen.
0.07 or 0.7.
I got the whatever the most dull point is.
Ugh.
And
That makes everything so messy.
I got a flashlight in there. I have a mask for when I go to Canada. Unfortunately, they're still using masks.
Passport, vaccination card for Canada, because they will freak if you don't have it.
Well, if you have the Arrive Canada app, it should be uploaded to the app.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Snacks, Mio Energy. So it's like the Mio flavored water, but I get to energize it. What else?
Headset, little scratch pad maybe. iPad.
Headset. I have
rechargeable batteries.
takeoff and landing data report cards.
Chargers.
Yeah. Oh, charging cables, big time. Portable charger.
Documents case. I keep all of my stuff in a hard plastic case. My medical, my radio operator's license, all of that stuff. A copy of my type certificates.
Yeah, all of my paperwork I have in that bag. You have to have it. It has to be within reach. Yeah, that's actually essentially it. There's really.
That's essentially it.
I don't really. There's nothing else I can think of.
That's kind of the big stuff. Eye drops. It's always nice to have eye drops.
Oh.
Do you guys get dry skin?
Yes.
Being up in
Lotion, sunscreen, but sometimes we put up just sunshades.
Yes.
Putting up sunshades is key. So
it's nice. $15 on Amazon. Best investment ever.
The entire window might be completely blocked away from being able to see outside, just from keeping the sun out of the flight deck, because you're so much higher in those altitudes. The UV index is so much greater. You know, it's like
sunscreen's definitely something I've started to carry, because I mean, you see like truckers and stuff like that, you know, they spend their whole lives driving with the sun on one side of their bodies. I mean, they've got one side of their bodies fried and the rest of it is, you know, regular looking skin. So trying to avoid something like that.
Yeah, flight instructors, that's kind of like the thing, right? It's always the right arm.
In fact, funny story there, I had a sunburn on my arm from when me and you went flying from Battle Creek to Lexington that one time.
Just one arm.
That would not go away for years, because I just kept getting exposed and it was just there.
That was the best flight of all time.
It was pretty fun.
That's neat.
We had a good time.
Is there anything else that you could spot on a pilot, on their body, where you're like, you're a pilot?
They're usually pretty good at announcing it. So.
Not on their body, no. Unless it's their work lanyard.
The hats that they if they're wearing it.
Well, I mean, like, some people are non-revving, right? So if they're wearing like a flight instructor thing, if they have anything on their roller bag that says crew.
Yeah.
Or there's metal bars on a crew bag, or two bags like latched on top of each other. That's typically a crew bag.
Okay.
Yeah, because that would be their flight bag hooked onto their roller bag.
Good to know.
Dead giveaway. This guy knows what's going on.
What accolades or credentials do you guys go by? Is it like pilot and then like alphabet soup afterwards, like MSRP, GFHIG?
Let's see. There's the different certificates that I've acquired were started out with my private pilot certificate, single engine land. Then I went into my instrument rating, which is just a glorified pilot or private pilot certificate, which allows you to fly into and around clouds, closer to, I should say.
Highly recommended for any prospective pilots out there.
Okay.
And then I went on to get my commercial multi certificate, followed by a commercial single engine certificate, which led to my certified flight instructor or certified flight instructor instrument, and now that's led me to be CL65 type rated commercial pilot.
All right. So the CL65, how does that usually range within, like if people hear CL65, they're like, oh.
No, it's just a Canada regional jet is what it is. It's a 50-seated airplane, or I shouldn't say 50-seat because there's different variations of it. I fly the CRJ 200 exclusively, So that kind of gives it away as to what company I fly for, because the CL65 goes based off of the CRJ 200, 700, and 900. My company only allows us to fly one or the other variant. So I've been blessed with flying just the CRJ 200 to start out. But you could also start out on the 7 and 900. It was just luck of the draw for myself, ending up on the 200.
Okay. And Nate, you said that your perspective, so you have had history in flying. You got into it a little bit before we started this conversation. What was it about cargo that, well, how did you get into cargo?
Well, so me and him, basically, we went through the same flight program. We both went to Western Michigan University. And after graduating, I was kind of looking for a job and hoping I could find something close to home. I kind of had a brushing with the owner of a company out there a while back when I was still in high school. Ooh, hit the mic there. So I ended up trying to find them and track them down, and I was lucky enough, they picked me up straight out of school, literally a few days after graduation is when I picked up my job, my first ground school. And I, unlike Marco, who went into flight instructing, I ended up getting a job as a flight engineer, which, if you've ever heard of that, it's like an older job. You'd find that on an older aircraft where there's the third pilot, basically. So while there's two pilots up front, captain, co-pilot, I'm the flight engineer back there working the switches and on the panel and stuff.
Oh, that's super neat.
Yeah, so it was a pretty cool job for me, especially first experience coming out of school, whereas everyone's, flying bug smashers and stuff. No offense, Marco. Here I am on an old tri-jet, blasting around the U.S. and Mexico and all sorts of cool places.
Oh, that's so neat.
Yeah, and then afterwards, they transitioned me into the right seat on a Falcon 20, which is basically a small business jet size aircraft converted to fly freight.
Neat. So is this, compared to the bug smashers, as you put it, to be working the button panel, is that something that you learned in school, or was that learn on the job sort of business?
No, that was a learn on. So a lot of the concepts kind of translate over, but there's a whole new set of schooling that goes into it, basically, and the company around that. You have to get through the ground school training and the check ride just like anything else, and it's its own certificate. So I'm a turbofan rated flight engineer.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, just like Marco, I'm sure Marco will say the same thing about his initial jet training, but it's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, so to obtain any certificate, there's a pattern, right? You'll go through ground school, and then you'll go through whatever flight portion you need to obtain the certificate, right? So whether that be simulator training or in the actual airplane. Now, operating a jet comes with a high cost, so you don't necessarily do training in the flight deck, as they say, whereas if you're a student pilot, right, you'll go out and do hours of flight training in the aircraft itself.
What is it like being in a flight simulator? Is it pretty spot on?
It's like flying on a beach ball.
Yeah, you never forget the first time you walk into one of those things. It's incredible.
How so?
I've always liked airplanes. I always flew Microsoft Flight Simulator on my laptop. Yeah. When I was a kid, whenever I was playing video games. But, the dream, and for mostly anybody, is just to fly one of those simulators, right? Being actually at the controls, and they can be so realistic that when you are driving the airplane over a light on the ground, you can feel it in your seat. It's incredibly realistic. Now, the university that we went to had simulators that were non-motion. However, they were still approved by the FAA.
Yeah. So we had a little bit of exposure there, but you get to an airline that's running this sort of stuff, and here's this big flight simulator. There's a retractable bridge that leads onto it, and it's this big module mounted on some giant hydraulic actuators, or some of them are even electric, simulating that full motion. Yeah, just like you said, it'll throw you right back in your seat.
Yeah, you feel the acceleration or the braking forces. It's a little more difficult to apply lateral G's, if you will, or vertical G's. Feeling that sinking of your body weight in your seat as you're climbing, descending in a turn, whatever it might be.
Well, funny story about that one. I don't know about you, but the first flight sim like that I was in, the 7.2, it's pretty old and beaten down. The little seat latch wasn't secure, so as soon as they were doing some sort of scenario where they had to pull up, the pilots up front had to pull up, back I went, zoom.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So what's a typical day for you?
It really depends on your show time. If you have the early show time, your morning routine will likely involve coffee at home. You're on the road, nobody else is around. You get to the airport, it's an absolute ghost town. You and your other passengers are the only ones walking through. It's very unique compared to the, afternoon rush hour or evening rush hour, if you will. It's really rather smooth. The afternoon show times, it's a little bit different. You fly into the night instead of flying into the afternoon. Early morning show times, you start at, as early as 4:45, 5:15, and you fly until noon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, typically. Now, that's if nothing goes wrong. Your duty period for a report time of that, and depending on how many legs you fly, it can vary between, I don't know, just a ballpark is 6 to 12 hours. I have a table that I carry around on my lanyard that kind of helps me make sure that I'm not getting violated as far as my what we call flight duty period. So from our report time, we can't operate up until a certain time. But yeah, so it can get pretty late in the day or early in the morning if depending on which way you want to chop it up.
How does it affect your sleep?
Oh yeah, so this is something that the FAA or the company does not really take into consideration is your circadian rhythm. So if you're doing late shows, on your first trip of the month, and then your second trip of the month is 3 days later, and your report time is the early show, and you got to be at the airport at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, now you're used to being up at 9 o'clock in the morning because you've been getting to the hotel, or you've been getting home at 11:30 or midnight, or maybe earlier if you get lucky. So
I'll stop you there and say, if any feds are listening, we get 8 hours in any 24-hour period, no matter what. Full stop.
So it's regulated then, that it should be regulated.
It is a regulation, but sometimes things get a little wonked up, and and when they're bouncing you around like that, and I've got some stories, but I'll let Marco finish here. But
yeah, I mean, it's rest. It can be defined a million different ways. There's no clear-cut black and white answer as far as rest goes, other than the time period when it starts and when it ends, right? And that's their declaration of rest. So what is rest to you? What is rest to me? Might be completely different. To the company, it's when your hotel door shuts. Now you're resting. But if you've had a bad day at the airline, there might be a scenario that you might be thinking about laying in your bed, or if you have something going on at home, might be keeping you up next thing you know, it's midnight, right? Because who doesn't sit there and thinks about life at night laying in bed?
Sure.
So some days I'm more tired than others, but I wouldn't say that I've ever had a day at work where I've, or at least I haven't had a day yet where I've said, you know what, I'm so tired right now that I just shouldn't be at work. And we have protocols for that. We can call it fatigued.
Okay. So what would be the protocol for that? How do you go about saying that you're fatigued?
You'll just call the scheduling department for us, and you'll just say, hey, I'm fatigued. Here are the circumstances. They should say, okay, we understand. We'll find another pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Should, right? Some might try to talk you out of it, but, it really kind of depends on who's on the other end of the phone. The training for crew scheduling is so up and down. There's newer schedulers, and then there's, people who have been around and have a little bit more discrepancy.
Well, those new schedulers, I mean, they don't really understand probably that it's a regulatory thing. Once that word comes out of your mouth, you're declaring, I am not fit to fly. I need, I can't do it.
The scheduling department, they most likely have a lot going on, especially if there's an irregular operation going on, or IROP, as they say. It might cut into their other, problems that they have going on, and you're just kind of adding fuel to the fire with that, because now they got to bring in another pilot from Detroit, Atlanta, Minneapolis, wherever, New York, wherever one of our bases is, and that can cause a, 3-4 hour delay.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it was a huge factor where I worked, because this was a small mom and pop shop basically. So, you call fatigue, there might not be another guy to fill your seat, so you might be costing this company $100,000.
Right. But
not that that's a consideration on the pilot front, but it's
sure.
It's tough to make that call.
It's a reality sort of thing. Now, when you say that you're fatigued and you state your reasons, what are acceptable reasons? What are reasons that you'll get an eye roll about? Like, I imagine you can't say, "Hey, I'm fatigued. I partied. I had a 3-day binge, now I'm hungover."
That's not acceptable.
There's another reg that ties into that, but
our company policy doesn't allow us to drink 8 hours prior to report time. But the FAA, they have a reg that says 8 hours prior to operating the aircraft. Or the easiest way I would teach it to students is, hey, 8 hours, bottle throttle. So we don't drink, at midnight and then go and fly at 6 in the morning. That's not what we're doing. Because that can get you into a lot of trouble. Now, that's just a very broad way of doing things. Obviously, there's a blood alcohol content that goes into that there's a limit. But kind of back to what's an acceptable fatigue report. A good example would be, hey, I'm in the hotel and a pipe burst, and they had a resource company come out, and they're pumping fans all night, yelling up and down the hallways at each other. And it's 2:30 in the morning. I got to be up at 3:45 to make the 4:15 van for a 20-minute van ride to the airport. I've been up all night. I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow morning. I'm not going to be able to operate. That's an acceptable answer. Something that's not an acceptable answer is, you've been sitting in the airport for 3 hours and your plane's been delayed because of maintenance, and you're just tired of sitting in the airport, and now you've maybe taken on an extension beyond your flight duty period, or, things of that matter. More things that a lot of pilots deal with. Now, if you've been delayed for 7 hours, okay, our policy is you get a day room at a hotel if it's anything beyond 4.5. So let's say you're delayed for 7 hours and your hotel hasn't been issued up until 6 hours into the delay. Well, there's something that they might have done wrong. right? So, or, you know, are you actually fatigued, or do you want to play it by the book?
They 24 you guys for that? Must be nice.
Yeah, cargo's a little different.
How is it different?
Oh, you've been sitting in Pietro for 7.5, 8 hours
All right,
waiting for the freight
cargo's
to show up or clear
cargo's
customs.
a little different. Now,
Oh, that sucks.
remember, you weren't flying for like UPS or FedEx or anything like that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just
No,
leave that.
on-demand charter. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not pretending that I'm, one of those guys. But shout out to the Order of the Sleepless Nights. By the way.
Sure.
So what cargo were you moving?
Oh, it was all sorts of stuff. I
Okay.
mean, it was on-demand charter. So basically, anytime anybody needed anything moved, they'd call us up, or there'd be some sort of bidding software that we have sales reps reaching out and putting those bids in. But I mean, we were moving parts for the automotive guys. We were moving chips, drilling equipment, medical supplies, vaccines. During the
Really?
COVID, well, it's still ongoing, but
Sure.
we were the first plane to deliver vaccines to Belize.
What was that like?
I wasn't on the flight. That was my buddy Kyle. But they had the water spouts going off for us, welcoming the airplane and all that stuff. But I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
Yeah. So we've flown all sorts of cool stuff.
I didn't know you got a water cannon salute. That's like one of the more unique accolades, I think. Everybody kind of dreams about that.
That's sort of like a ceremonial end of career thing.
Oh,
Right. You
okay.
usually see one water cannon salute. I've never seen one in person. I've heard about them.
I've played in sprinklers before. It's kind of the same thing.
Not even close. There's the water cannon salute comes to mind because I had an incredible instructor down in Phoenix, Arizona, and he was retired American Airlines, and he showed us his retirement video, and at the end he gets his water cannon salute, and he couldn't keep it together.
Oh.
Yeah, he got very emotional about it, and I was like, I want that, and it was kind of like it's the send-off of your career.
Good way to close the book. Yeah.
It's a great way to close the book. Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes my heart warm.
Yeah.
Now, you say he was a great instructor. What makes a great instructor?
There's a couple of things that goes into it. You've got to be personable because you don't know what's going on in people's lives. I was never an instructor, so I can't personally attest to it. But I always had my extenuating circumstances. But no, I had a couple of great instructors. They would always work with me. They wanted to work with my schedule. If I wasn't feeling comfortable, they'd help me out. Work me through the scenario. Because that's what at the end of the day, that's what the pilot training is all about. Is recognizing something and working through it for a positive result. I had guys like Riley Freeland and Alex Austin, and some real cool guys at Western, and then some mentors like Jim Finney and George Isakawi and Ben Hastings and Matt Cottrell at the company I worked on after that. Really, I feel like I fit in a year's worth of experience in the span of just a few. So just the ability to make an impression on your students is huge, and I feel like a lot of the guys in my life were able to do that. So
Feelings mutual on your end, Marco? Is that sort of just what makes a good instructor for you? Speaking as an instructor.
It's the instructor. It's not the flight school. My
Absolutely.
first instructor, we still talk to this day. We talk once a week at the minimum. I would say I talk to him just about as much as I talk to my brother a week. And, they're not just a flight instructor. That's how I viewed it. And you can never thank them enough for what they're passing along to you. And time and time again, you'll see it that everybody kind of comes down to this common saying is, you'll never be able to thank me, just pass it forward. You know, give it on to the next person. And I have students that text me that they're like, I never, you know, like I just wanted to like, you know, give you a hug, or I just wanted to be able to do something, you know, for you, but now I kind of know what you were telling me at the time. And it's just trying to make the next generation of pilots better than you were, essentially. And just kind of like letting them know what worked for you, what didn't. And it comes down to also being able to read a room, you know, what might work for this individual, what might not work for another, and dealing with the different personalities that you might see.
Well, that's a huge component that copy and pastes into your later career is, you know, personality assessment.
Yeah.
What's a personality assessment?
Oh, what's it called? The Myers-Briggs? Is that what it is?
That sounds familiar. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Is that what the personality test is?
One of them. Yeah, there's like 200
Yeah,
these days.
Back in the day, they took that into consideration. I know Delta has a personality test that they take. You actually, if you're offered a CJO or a conditional job offer, you have to go see a psychic. Psychiatrist.
Okay.
You have to delete that.
Wait a minute.
No.
You have to go and see a psychologist. A psychic. What would a psychic tell you your future? But yeah, so you really had to kind of not deter somebody away from flight training because it can become extremely stressful. And every single pilot arrives at the plateau, meaning they will not progress. They get into this funk. And you have to find in that student, and this isn't in any book. It kind of is. They talk about it a little bit. But what they don't talk about is how to find that tool in their toolbox that gets them out of that funk. Right?
Yeah.
And to keep progressing forward, whatever it is. And sometimes they just find it within themselves. And something just clicks one day. And I'm like, where did that come from? Who are you? So, but to kind of go back, the flight instructor plays the most critical role, and it starts at the private pilot because you are establishing the foundation of what is to come later on. You are, setting the
benchmark for
the
them
benchmark of
being
what it
a
should be
pilot in
like,
command.
and you're playing that role model too.
So
they view you as this is what a professional pilot looks like from day one.
So no matter what their personality is, you can tie it into everybody being able to recognize these scenarios and work through it, or work with somebody to work through it, stuff like that. Because when you're doing these first few licenses up to your commercial, right, you're learning how to be a pilot in command. Basically, you're flying on your own, or probably flying on your own, or being, just out there dealing with this stuff in real time. And then once you start getting to the required crew member sort of aircraft and stage of your career, you're not just learning how to be a pilot in command, but you're learning how to do that as well as being a team member, because these are split duties. So it's about task delegation, cockpit coordination, crew resource management, all sorts of stuff like that, safety risk assessment and management.
And that's probably one of the things that is the learning curve going from prop aircraft, right, that have propellers on the front, going into jet aircraft, is you have to teach somebody how to allocate SRM, right, which is single pilot resource management. They have to be able to operate everything on their own, determine what's safe, what's not, essentially at the end of the day, and that goes across the entire board. If something's going wrong, diagnosing whatever system's wrong. Weather, is it even safe to go? That's all single pilot resource management. Once you get to the airlines or whatever commercial job that you're going through, it becomes a crew.
Mhm.
So, hey, I saw this. What are you seeing? What do you think about this? And and a lot of people have this issue
Or
getting
the classic, why is it doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What's going on here? So it's that's one of the learning curves. Getting over the airline is somebody else is in the other seat.
Yeah.
That you should make sure that you guys are on the same page. Yeah.
And something.
Do you approach that issue very often? Where you
Every
kind
day.
of butt heads?
Yeah, on
Every
my
day.
most recent trip, I had a conflict with the captain. I did not agree with what she was, how she was handling the scenario with a potentially intoxicated passenger. It didn't really sit well with me. It seemed as if she was taking quite a bit of time to determine if they were intoxicated or not.
And it can be completely irrelevant from their personality too. It's just that ability to come to a decision in a timely manner that becomes critical, especially for a captain.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's exactly, the long story short, that's what it came down to is, hey, we're spending a little bit too much time to determine this. Ask them to very politely to take the next flight, free.
It's one of those.
Here's why.
One of those things that we call fixation that could be a real killer.
Oh yeah. And,
Fixation.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate on that?
So it's as it sounds. It's you're spending way too much time on a single task or point of interest, right? So if I'm looking at, let's say, I've got an erroneous engine. It's an old Boeing 737 or something like that. It still uses EPR, which is engine pressure ratio, which measures the pressure at the start of it. For us, it was PT2 and PT7. It's just the difference in pressure between the front and the rear of the engine. There was a crash in DC where basically they got fixated on it. They didn't really, they weren't checking all of their backup indicators. If you got, besides EPR, you've got N1, N2, oil pressure, stuff like that. That'll tell you what's going on, EGT stuff that's going on with the engine. So, if everything else is clear, you're probably good to go. But they spent way too much time looking at the wrong thing, or and I'm probably mixing up accidents here. That was an anti-ice issue, but there was a DC-8. I forget going into where, probably the Seattle area, I think. But they had an erroneous gear indication, and it turned out it was just a burnt out bulb. So everything was fine. They ran out of fuel, crashed the plane. A little bit short of the runway.
No survivors.
How does that happen?
Fixation.
Really?
It's giving too much attention to one thing that might be or maybe a small issue, or it could be a big issue. But nonetheless, you got to think about the big picture, right? You got humans flying through the air at 400 or 500 plus miles an hour. Could be a problem, might not be. There are things that you have to diagnose immediately. There are things that can wait.
I see.
So
luckily, they make it easy for us. They color code it. Red is bad.
Yeah, red is bad. Yellow's, meh.
I see.
Green and white are kind of like, we're all right. So, yeah,
Green
depending
and
on what
white,
comes
we're
up,
all
you never
right.
know.
I see. So you had mentioned how there's single passenger, where it's just, you just got to handle what you're dealing with. And
Single pilot?
Single pilot.
Yeah.
Cool. Single pilot. I know just enough to write about this now.
Hell.
And then you go into a crew where you're meeting a bunch of personalities, where you're working with, I imagine, several people just for one flight. What is the social culture of being, a pilot, an instructor in an aviation sort of scene, whether it's a hangar, whether it's an airport, whether it's just shooting the shit with other pilots? What is kind of the culture that you guys get to share where, nobody else understands the sort of stuff that we go through?
Yeah, well, you get to pretend you're a lot smarter than other people, even though you're not.
Yeah. No, for me, I would just say positive. That's like the first word that comes to my mind. I'm pretty sociable, so
It's a pretty tight-knit community. Everyone's pretty, for the most part, everyone's pretty good to each other.
And it's there. You do have the pilots that are out there that like to show off
Go straight.
whatever it is they got going on.
Sure.
I've flown this, I've flown that. Or if you're a student pilot, oh, I have this many hours. I'm on this lesson.
Got every type rating under the sun.
Yeah, I got, I flew this airplane, I flew that airplane. So there is some toxic egos out there, just like anything else. You show up to the golf course and you got your buddy over there who's got all the newest, latest, and greatest, and you're swinging your dad's old clubs, but nonetheless the ball gets down the fairway. And it's kind of the same deal.
That was a dig at me, wasn't it?
No, I want your driver. That's
Yeah, how was golfing earlier?
we played like shit. But hey, we got to play golf on a Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
There are worse things to do.
Yeah,
there's another plus of the lifestyle.
Yeah. The schedule can suck.
Sure.
The schedule can suck. You can work Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, the whole nine.
Oh yeah.
If you're really paying attention and you're really in the contract and you're paying attention to your bidding system, you can get holidays off. I got very lucky last year having Thanksgiving, Christmas, and ended up getting COVID for New Year's, of course. But nonetheless, I had all three off one way or another. Mm-hmm. But most pilots don't get it.
Okay.
And that's kind of the, hey, we got to do Christmas on the 18th, this month. Meanwhile, all the other, especially if you're further along in your career and you have a family and, you got to explain this to your kids. Why is Santa coming to my house early? I don't get it. Or you just might not be there to get Santa's presents.
I see. So I imagine it's kind of, it adds in difficulty explaining it to people that aren't in the field. Like to have friends where it's like, yeah, I'd love to hang out with you on a Saturday, but I'm going to be flying. Can't do that then. Do you struggle in any way with friendships outside?
Oh yeah. For me,
it's tough.
I work in that freight job. It was basically, I was more or less on house arrest until they told me I wasn't. So I was just sitting there. I kind of lived on the threshold of where I needed to be in order to get there in time. Get dressed, get my gear, get there in time. So really, I just was at home all day, every day, waiting for them to call, and it was 24 hours a day. On the 121 side of the operation, I get my 1 and 7, and they did their best to release you for the weekend. Sometimes we're better than others.
That must be nice getting an early release from reserve. I've never heard of that in the regional airline.
Oh, don't worry. There's more to the story. The plot thickens, my friend. And then other times where they would just say, "Yeah, we're busy. We're just gonna work it till we're not busy." So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's periods where you just be going nonstop, because on one side of the operation they legally have to give you rest. Well, they have to give you after flying. They have to give you X amount of hours of sleep or of rest anyway. But on the other side of the operation, legally, they could just work you 7 days a week as much as they wanted, as long as you fell within the restrictions that are set out for them. By the FAA between months, quarters, and the total calendar year. And there was a time, I kind of blew his mind a little bit when I told him, yeah, I just got 600 hours in 6 months. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
Could you offer me a frame of reference as to what the average flight hours might be compared to
Well, that would be an
606
interesting question to
months?
answer.
It depends. It
Yeah.
depends. I'm
Okay.
going to jump in here because there are, I said I was a flight instructor, and there might be a student out there or a potential pilot curious about this. If you're doing flight training, this is all geographically dependent. I don't care what
Absolutely.
anybody says. Your flight hours determine where you live in the country.
Some results will vary.
Yeah. So if you live in Michigan, right, you will not fly in the winter months. You
As a-
will not.
Small aircraft pilot.
I see.
Smaller, well, there are some small aircraft pilots that are approved to
the-
fly into
the-
known
the
icing, but
equipped
likely
aircraft,
to do
yes.
that while you're in training is slim to none.
Okay, Mr. Technicality.
Unless you have Boku dollars and you have... Anyway. I moved from Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo to Fort Collins, Colorado, where there's 320 days of sunshine a year, roughly. Maybe a little bit more. I don't know what the exact number is. But there's also other factors that come in, the weather that rolls off the mountains. You can't, it's like Florida in the afternoon. It's going to thunderstorm.
Mm.
The winds will pick up to over 50, 60 miles an hour in the afternoons in Colorado. You cannot fly. And in between there, when the storms are brewing, as they say, you will have to deal with, 15, 20 mile an hour winds in Colorado as a student pilot. And in Michigan, you wouldn't see but maybe 4 or 5 candidates out there. And those guys and girls are most likely commercial pilots. And those students, when you see them come back in, whether or not they're student, private, instrument, or commercial, you'd see them walk back into the flight operations area and be like, "You're crazy." But that's
shaking up white knuckled.
yeah, but that's like a normal day out in Colorado.
I see.
Snow though, people who are doing flight instruction in Texas, flying in snow, not doing it, right? Doing that in Michigan, where there might be like just a little bit of flurries outside, no problem.
Yeah, better get
you never
used to it. So to train as you did in Michigan, does that give you, well, you also did in Colorado and all of that, does that give you more of an up as opposed to somebody who has learned in Texas and doesn't know what snow looks like?
Like
or,
lived and died in Texas
Yeah.
as far as like their training goes?
I would
Nah.
say it could. But I mean,
Yes and no, just because you've kind of acquired the knowledge of like the different weather patterns.
yeah.
But something that was, at the end of the day, yes. Because in Colorado, our field elevation was 5,000 feet. In
Sheesh.
Kalamazoo, it was
Just
980
Just
something.
under 1,000. 982, I think. Field
I
elevation.
want to say 986.
Maybe I'm
986 was
Maybe I'm
definitely.
thinking of Pontiac or something.
I don't know. So the aircraft behaves differently, right? So if you're down at sea level down in Texas in the heat of the summer, yeah, it's gonna act differently.
And that's due to
And for the better or for worse, you
Okay.
can play both sides of the game, both
I
sides of
see.
the ball there, I guess.
But it would be ideal to then know kind of all fields, all sorts of weather. You have to know this,
well, that's
right?
yes, you have to know this, and at some point in your career, everyone's going to be on the same playing field.
Yeah,
But as a student pilot in Michigan, I mean, we've got Arctic cold fronts blasting down from the circle,
right, you just
and
watch,
slamming into Lake Michigan.
yeah, and you just watch low pressure wave after low pressure wave fall through the area, and you're just kind of thinking to yourself, when is it gonna end? And that's kind of like how ski season is in Colorado, but it's a little bit of a different feeling. You're like, all right, more snow, But it's, to each is their own. At the end of the day, you, whether by choice or by not, you become an amateur meteorologist at the end of the day.
I did write that down. Could you guys moonlight as weathermen based on your knowledge?
Can I give you
Okay,
a percentage of how it's gonna, like how much it's gonna rain or what area is gonna be affected? No.
No, but I'll give you a hint here. They get the weathermen get their information from aviation sources.
No kidding.
And they also have absolutely no idea what they're talking about half the time, unless the weather machine's telling them. And luckily, another color-coded system. More colors equals bad. Green is good. Red is not good.
Red is bad.
Purple means you probably want
Could
to
be, could
take
not
out
be.
a new life insurance policy.
Interesting. So
Could be good, could be bad.
Yeah.
these aviation sources, is this somebody that, little me could log on to a website?
Oh, yeah,
and
Oh
see?
You
yeah,
do it
it's,
right
it's a
now.
government website.
Yeah, what is it?
Aviationweather.gov.
Hey-o.
God
Should get
bless
paid for
us.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, it just goes to show like how much we've logged into it. There's you don't even have to create a username. It's
And that's just one source.
yeah.
I mean,
There's
There's
so
all
many
sorts
other.
of stuff at your fingertips. They pay
There's
for us.
apps out there that give you live radar. It can give you the
For flight plan go, all sorts of stuff like that.
FliGht. You know what? For the first time since 2018, I don't have FliGht. Just this. Yep. Yeah, it's over.
I haven't had it since school, so
Uh-oh, I'm telling.
sorry, flight.
Yeah. So you mentioned aviationweather.gov. You mentioned that you have a table on your lanyard in order to... what was it that you did with the table on your lanyard?
Yeah. So I have a piece of plastic on my lanyard, or a card, if you will. I should call it. It does like very simple calculations for like degrees Fahrenheit to degrees Celsius, because everything in the aircraft is
It's a little
reading
tabletop,
out. And,
performance
yeah,
tabletop.
yeah, performance tabletop. So, depending on what your report time is and how much you're flying that day affects your flight duty period. I'd go get it for you, but it's down in my car.
No worries. What other resources do you guys use to either keep up on your knowledge or to inform you of new stuff that's in the field? Is there like an Aviators Monthly that you
there's
guys
stuff
subscribe
that comes
to?
out every day, really. I mean, as long as you're in it with the forums, there's plenty of Facebook pages, professional jet pilots, Freight Dogs Anonymous for all the funny giggles of stuff going wrong. Other than that, everything ASA makes is pretty solid. Everything Explained is probably one of the best books out there for, really getting into the nitty-gritty and having everything in plain English. And then every year the government issues a new FAR-AIM, which is just all the regulations, and all the supplemental information, and all of its updated, or amended clauses.
Yeah, and you'll see this here in just a few short months. We are updated from union emails as far as where they're at in negotiations with mainline and this, that, and the other, and subtle reminders of kind of what's going on behind the scenes. You get those same emails from the company as well, but
So as far as flying and getting all the credentials needed,
yeah.
is flying a plane in the U.S. about the same or different as flying a plane in the UK versus flying a plane in
That's a great question.
Uruguay versus flying a plane, and does it vary state by state?
So we've worked really hard to attain the number one safety record.
Okay.
GA gets a little muddy because there's what general aviation. People get a little more bold, and it's not as recurrent. They've got their license.
Well, if you own your own airplane,
yeah,
in your own hangar, out in the middle of nowhere,
something's maintained. And that's how John Denver died, right? I mean, he had an experimental airplane. He went and flew it before test flying. Realized mid-flight he couldn't switch the fuel selector over and ran out of fuel. So stuff just stuff like that. People not looking at the weather. They're not. It's absolutely. I don't want to say it's in a different league because I don't want to insult private pilots, because some of these guys are brilliant pilots, but it's definitely in a different league, at the very least regulatorily. So,
from my experience, I only fly to Canada, international, if you will. Canada has their own set of rules.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we operate by our rules until
Canada.
there's a difference,
And that
right?
time-
So for the most part, it's the same up until we have to, oblige Canada,
Okay.
essentially.
And that's ICAO rules, which is basically Europe. That's Europe's flight rules.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually didn't know
Actually,
that.
ICAO is based in Montreal, I'm pretty sure.
I love and hate Montreal.
Montreal.
Yeah, because you'll be flying along and it's like, oh, blah, 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 4765, go ahead and descend me to. And then, they'll be like, oh, oui, wadi-wa. They'll be speaking French.
Oh, man, you get one thing wrong on the radio call, they come back and they fry you.
I haven't been yelled at too bad there,
Okay.
but the restrictions are very... They're more monitored. They're very much so. I don't know if it's because we're coming from like an American
I don't think it's that
call sign or whatever it might be, but there was one time where we were slowing and we were 5, 8, or maybe 10 knots fast. They said say airspeed, and I said, yeah, we're this slowing to this. It's where we operate out of, no big deal.
Mm.
But the fact that they have to kind of check in for you being 5 knots, 8 knots fast, to say, what are you doing? It's
they're very particular.
They're
I
very
see.
particular.
Comparatively. Whereas, controllers in the U.S., they're really good at making it work.
Right. They're up there to make it work, not to make it harder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Not that it's all flying by the seat of your pants, but they're very good at what they do. And if you're a little bit out, you're a little fast, you're a little slow, they might get on you if it's a really busy day, like say JFK or something like that. But other than that, they're very, very good at what they do, and they can make it work.
How fast is too fast? How slow is too slow?
Well, technically, below 10,250 is the speed limit. But if they've got an assigned altitude or speed in mind, you're not deviating from that altitude.
Well, also kind of, to expand on this a little bit more, if you want to get into not as technical by the rules, when you say what is too fast or what is too slow, are you talking about like speed limits, or are you talking about when the aircraft stops flying?
I guess both. For safety measures of a plane.
So
like
have you ever
how
been
fast?
flying along and you're in the climb out and you hear a ding,
Boom, boom.
ding,
Yeah.
a 2 chime?
Mm.
So that means you've just gone above 10,000 feet.
Okay.
There's no speed restriction except for Mach 1. You can't go beyond the speed of sound over the continental United States.
Thanks a lot,
Well,
Concord.
that's not what I saw in Top Gun Maverick.
Well, there's...
All right, knock it off.
So first of all, we don't fly F-18s, but there are certain parameters that the military, they get certain privileges.
Fun
Such-
fact, the CRJ-200 is the only commercial airliner that has the ability to fly in continuous inverted flight, upside down.
God, here he goes.
The entire time, just for funsies.
We share the same engines as an A-10.
I hope you get the 200. Comment like that.
I'll fly the little brat.
Hey, it's fast. It has the roll rate of an F-16. Mm-hmm.
Take your word
Bet
for
you
it.
didn't know that.
I'll take
What's
your
a
word
Yeah,
for it.
roll
you'll
rate?
find out. Roll rate?
Roll rate. Are you saying ROLL?
Yeah.
Okay.
Roll rate.
The rate
Roll
of roll.
The rate of roll at which you can.
You can tell it's fast
Turn
by
the
the
air-
screaming in the back.
Yeah. No, I've never done. I've never tested that with passengers, but there is a delicacy that you need to understand when hand flying the aircraft, meaning not using the what?
Memories.
Oh, I know. When hand flying the aircraft, meaning not using autopilot.
We are part of two different worlds.
Oh, I know.
I see.
But anyway, yeah. So there's airspeed restrictions that the FAA implements, and then there's limitations as to what the aircraft can achieve.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of depends on weight, altitude, and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, the aircraft will stall or will no longer be able to produce a lift. Or if we go beyond that, we'll just no longer be able to fly. That can happen at any airspeed.
It's a certain
Right?
angle of attack.
It's the certain angle of attack. And I'm sure if there's any other pilot that's going to be listening to this podcast,
Reduce the angle of attack.
they're rolling their eyes right now. Like, these guys suck.
see.
These guys suck.
The same line you'll hear 500 times in every presentation.
Yeah.
So you said difference, that you go by FAA until there's a difference. What
Yeah.
kind of differences could there be?
Company approved SOPs.
3,000 feet above the ground in this particular airspace. I don't know if that's any airspace in Canada or if it's just the particular airspaces that we fly to. I have to look into this. I don't really know. It's 200 knots. Whereas there are two airspaces that I can think of off the top of my head where it's 2,500 feet for 200 knots, and then you're clear to blast off to 250, and then above 10 you can go however much you're filed for or whatever the company wants you to fly at, unless it's go home leg day or go home day. Then we tend
Go
to
home
fly.
day.
Then we tend to fly a little bit faster.
I
Don't
see.
know.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. But nonetheless, it's yeah. Typically, you can keep it 250 knots fast to what they call the marker or the final approach fix. Basically, it's a GPS waypoint. It's the best way. I'm just going to describe it to you. It's a GPS waypoint to the general public. I know it's not a GPS waypoint.
A gyps.
All right. Yeah.
As I put it.
So, if you're flying into New York and you're not doing 250 to the marker, you're going to get yelled at.
Yeah.
Like, big time. And then there are other places that will say, all right, keep it to 170 till a 5-mile final contact tower. Right? That's like Detroit's number one saying. Keep it slow, please. You know? Yeah. But Atlanta, fast. Keep it fast. Right? To the point where it's pushing you.
Make a Southwest pilot blush.
Yeah. Well, they kind of push you to the point where it's not unsafe, but it's definitely pushing that envelope of, all right, like we have a threshold of if we cross this, we have to abort this landing and we have to take off midair again, essentially.
Yeah.
And
you're planning your
it's a
landing
go-around.
rollout, and if you're not stopped by a certain point, you're gonna go, okay, this plane's not stopping, let's go. Something's wrong.
Oh, interesting. So why is it in Detroit where it's like go slow, and Atlanta it's like can you go faster?
A little bit less traffic. Atlanta, I think somebody told me something crazy like Atlanta handles like it's like number one for international arrivals in the U.S. or something.
It's the busiest airspace in the world.
Really?
Yeah, and they're incredibly efficient at how they do things. Incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
What makes them so efficient?
When you fly to an
PFM. That's what we call pure fucking magic.
No, it's I don't know. When you fly into Atlanta, it's like you know where you're going. It's hey, you got to be on top of this stuff. They're just busier.
Okay.
You know, in Detroit, it's not. Right? It's kind of like flying into LAX. You know, you're a little bit more sat up in your seat than if you're flying into, I don't know, San Francisco, San Diego.
Okay.
Or if you're flying into Memphis, or if you're flying into Cleveland. It's a little bit more, you know, hey, man, I can't make this airspeed work. Oh, no worries. What can you do?
I see.
You know?
Why couldn't you make the airspeed work?
Slippery aircraft.
Bad planning.
Bad planning. Talking.
Nice try, Marco.
I appreciate your honesty.
Talking too much to the captain about your round of golf, whatever it might be. It's not a deal breaker. You just have to be honest. Let them know, hey, I can descend quickly, or I can slow down quickly, but I can't do both. What would you like? And unfortunate, the unfortunate side of things is, if you can't make it happen and you don't tell anybody, you're likely doing paperwork, kind of telling the FAA and your company and if it's bad enough, your union representatives.
Because you've accepted a clearance, therefore you've told them, I can do this. So for you to blow past that and all of a sudden say, hey, listen, we're way off. I'm fast and high now. We're not going to be able to do this approach. They're gonna have to re-vector you around. You've just made their day longer than it needs to be.
I see.
So
this paperwork that's being done, is it just stating the case? Is it a long essay?
It'll be like an event log or something like that. You're stating your side of the story. What happened? What went wrong? Why why am I filling out this piece of paper and sending it into whoever?
This has been the first part of a 3-part series for pilots. I hope you learned more. I know I did. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for part 2. Follow me at Takes One to Write One on Instagram and Pinterest, and vibe to my curated playlists on Spotify. Until then, I'm Katherine Arcady, and remember, it takes one to write one.